Good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started, so if everybody can find a seat. Hopefully you already have coffee. If not, maybe Carlos will give you a little bit more. Dr. Scott Siegel served as the Ceres Unified School District Superintendent since 2010. And before that, he was a math and science teacher, assistant principal, and chief business official for Ceres schools beginning in 1989. He has a bachelor's in physics from UC Berkeley, a master's in education from CSU Stanislaus, and a doctorate in education from the University of Pacific. Dr. Scott Siegel enjoys running, hiking, studying natural history, and reading in his spare time. He has a wife and 2 daughters. So please welcome with me Dr. Siegel as he shares about reopening our schools.
If it's okay, I'm going to, because I am safely distant from all of you. So I have some slides, and I'm going to go off them because we don't have them up yet, but that will work just fine. They're not really that essential, more for your entertainment than and distraction from me being boring. So I woke up this morning and was getting ready, and I was looking at my news feed on my cell phone and eating breakfast and reading the news on my phone, which is kind of a weird thing. Way the world is now. And there was this article about schools opening, and I was reading it. It's like, oh, damn it, they stole my thing. And like, really, all I've got to do is forward this article, and you don't need me to come here and speak, because it's basically hitting all the points that I did. So nothing I'm going to tell you is really that out there or forward thinking or inside, just information that's not available elsewhere. But we'll be able to put a spin for Stanislaus County or angle for Stanislaus County, and also answer any questions you have that may be particular to this county. So I'm going to start with where we've been and what we know in some big broad strokes. And the first thing, of course, we closed schools as the nation started locking down in March. On March 19th, we had our first day without students, or that was our last day with students, I believe. And then June 4th would have been our last day of school this year. We had the closure for that entire period of time. And that pretty much coincided with what society did. Unfortunately, I think to some degree, we've reopened a little too fast. I think we know that now, looking backwards on it, because we really did bend the curve. One thing that people don't always get totally is what exponential growth really means, because it's hard to really understand. Exponential growth doesn't really fit in with our everyday experiences. The idea that something could double every 2 or 3 or 4 days, you get to really big numbers really fast. I was telling our staff at one point, we'd meet weekly with our principals, and it's like, okay, if we hadn't done anything, if we had just gone about our days like we normally do, by this date in California, we would have had 500,000 people infected, 1 million people infected, 10 million people infected. By the end of April, we would have had tens of million, over 10 million people, between 10 and 20 million people in California infected with this disease, which by itself, because most people get it mildly, isn't a problem, but probably 1% of people who get it die. Maybe 2%, but probably it's closer to 1%. And 1% of 1 million is a big number. And 1% of 10 million is a big number. And for the country, it would have been around 200 million people by this time would have been infected had we just let it run rampant. And 1% of that number is 2 million people. And that would have been an unacceptable result. So we did a great job as a country of bending that curve and flattening. We just didn't get it all the way down we needed to. And so now it's springing back up. And we're facing that. And that's in all of our thinking right now. In Stanislaus County yesterday, the governor announced a rollback for us. I'm not sure that it went far enough, in my opinion. Well, I'll talk later about that, what the kind of decisions that we're making as a society about what's important to have open and what's important not to have open. Having one thing open might impact our ability to have something else open. And then the final thing I just want to quickly touch on is the principal method of spread. So we've had a lot of meetings. The superintendents in this county have met several times with the county health officer by Zoom, not in person. And the big, I am up there now, perfect. The big takeaway on how it's spread is, yes, you can get it off a surface. It is possible to get it off a surface, but that's not what they're finding the primary method of spread is. It's in fact pretty rare for somebody to get it by touching a surface that somebody who was infected had just infected. The primary way of getting it is to be in close personal position with somebody for an extended period of time, a minute, 2 minutes, 10 minutes, with a person who's infected and contagious who may not even know that they are. So extended personal contact. It's not something you're going to get passing somebody in the hall, generally speaking. I mean, it's possible, but that's not what they're finding. They're finding it's people who are in contact with each other for a prolonged period of time. So if we go to the next slide. I'm going to read this. I'm going to read the whole quote. I couldn't fit the whole quote on the slide, and it'll take me just a moment here. This is from the American Academy of Pediatrics. When we start talking about, should we open schools up? What's the imperative to open schools up? Because we know if we open schools up, there's going to be more spread. We just know. We just can't bring people together and not have it spread more. With the above principles in mind, the American Academy of Pediatrics strongly advocates that all policy considerations for the coming school year should start with the goal of having students physically present in school. The importance of in-person learning is well documented, and there is already evidence of the negative impacts on children because of school closures in the spring of 2020. Lengthy time away from school and associated interruption of supportive services often results in social isolation, making it difficult for schools to identify and address important learning deficits, as well as child and adolescent physical and sexual abuse, substance use, depression, and suicidal ideation. This in turn places children and adolescents at considerable risk of morbidity and, in some cases, mortality. I'm not sure what the difference there is, but okay. Beyond the educational impact and social impact of school closures, there's been substantial impact on food security and physical activity for children and families. So we're giving a lot of reasons why schools need to open. The one they didn't really hit on very much is this is really, really rough on kids' education. And while, if you go to the next slide, while social distance learning, which we engaged in all spring, is better than nothing, it's not really working well. I mean, it is a failure. It is an absolute failure educationally. It's better than nothing, but there's lots of things that are better than nothing. Just a real quick word for Ceres Unified. When we got caught with as all school districts did, with like, okay, we're closing down in 3 days. We were in a actually relatively good position for a couple of reasons. One is we've had every student from kindergarten through 12th grade have a Chromebook that they take home on a daily basis. We're in our 5th year of that right now. So we didn't have to figure out where are we going to get the computers. How are we going to teach the kids how to use the computers and get procedures for them to have them at home. That was already done. That was no harder than do the same thing you do every day, take your computer home. We've been very concerned about students having Wi-Fi access, so we have bought or leased a large number of hotspots. And in February, when our technology person, our business person, started thinking, gosh, I wonder if this is going to force us to close down, they had an opportunity to secure a large number of hotspots that we could get out to families. So we never ran out of hotspots. We were looking for families who needed them. We were like, please tell us if you need this. The problem is the hotspots don't always work that well. If you're in a remote area, they don't necessarily work well for a variety of reasons. The bandwidth isn't that great, but it was better than nothing. So we weren't caught with having huge technology issues limiting kids. It's still, distance learning still didn't work, even with those barriers overcome. Make sure I'm in the right place here. So I want to share with you a couple of pieces that we would look at the imperative of us reopening. We've got to reopen for kids, or we've got to at least prepare that way. Now, in the last couple of weeks, it's kind of like, are we going to be able to with these surging cases? If things get bad enough, we won't be able to. But we're still planning as if we're going to reopen, as is every other school district in this county. And there is, if you go to the next slide, on the County Office of Education website, I'm not going to give you a link because you can Google it, and it's really easy to find. There's a little picture that looks like this, which is the school year planning guide for the coming year of how we're planning to deal with all of the different aspects of socially distancing and opening schools in the middle of a pandemic. And a couple of big takeaways. I'm going to tell you that it is simply not possible. We know this. It is simply not possible for us to socially distance to 6 feet in a school with every kid there every day. It's not going to happen. So given that it's not going to happen, what can we do? And we use phrases like to the extent practical, to the extent possible, on a lot of the things that we plan to do. And we're going to be dealing with things like this has in it, like how we're going to deal with buses. You cannot socially distance in a bus. And there's some ridiculous things that came out early on, just using buses as an example, where you can only have like 4 kids in a bus or 6 kids in a bus. Well, if we only have 6 kids in a bus, there's a lot of kids who rely on our buses to get to school. And we can't reopen without getting them to school. So we're going to have to just deal with it and do it. So every kid on the bus is going to wear a mask. And there's going to be a hand sanitizer. We can install a hand sanitizer station on the bus. You get on the bus, you pump the thing, wash your hand, go sit down. To the extent you can, sit with your family members because you're already infecting each other. If you're infected, keep your masks on. When you get off, pump again and get off. Not crowd the aisle, but get off in a very orderly fashion so you're not pumped up against each other as much. There's another big concept that's in here quite a bit, which is to the extent that we can, to try to keep classrooms who are already all interacting with each other, to try to keep them isolated from the rest of the campus. And we're probably going to be doing that by grade levels at elementary school. It's a little harder at junior high school and high school where they're interacting or switching classes all the time. But at elementary schools, it might be that we try to keep 3rd grade pretty much only interacting with 3rd grade to the extent that we can. And 4th grade only interacting with 4th grade. And that way, if something breaks out, we know, hey, this is a 3rd grade issue. It's not really impacting the rest of the school as much. All right, let's go to the next one. I kind of break it down this way. There's things that we have to do. If we're going to open schools, there's no point in opening schools not having classrooms. So these are, on the left side of the screen, you'll see a list of things that we are going to do whether we can socially distance or not. And to the extent that we can, we're going to take the measures that will help us keep kids safe. That's home to school transportation. The cafeteria, we have got to feed kids. We've got to feed them. Classroom and instructional program. There's no point in having school without classes, right? So those are things we got to do. Recess is a reality. We're not going to stick kids in a classroom for 6 hours and tell them just to deal with it. Hey, kids, it's rainy day schedule every day for the entire school year. That's not going to work. So what can we do during recess? What can we do, but realize that kids have to go out and burn that energy and have to move around? And the after-school program. The after-school program has become something that parents rely on. You know, the school system provides our national daycare system. The school system is our national daycare system. So parents who are working have to rely on schools. And in Ceres, we have an after-school program where it's free for anybody who wants it. So we will take every kid, every kid shows up, and it's free. And they'll do things like socially distancing, keep grade levels apart and all that. But the reality is we're going to have the kids that we have and do the best we can. Then there are things that are not essential, that we can live without. They're past the core. So if we can't do them with social distancing, we shouldn't be doing them. Because it's not worth taking a risk over. This is all about balancing risk. So athletics is one of those. We don't know yet exactly what the story is with athletics because we're waiting for the California Interscholastic Federation to give us their decisions that they're supposed to give us, but that's not happening until the middle or end of July. I suspect that it's possible there will be sports that don't happen this coming year. I don't know how you do wrestling or football or water polo or basketball in a safe way. The NBA is having trouble figuring out how to do basketball, and they can test every player every day. We simply can't do that. And so that whether we can do those sports or not is yet to be seen. Right now, our athletes are conditioning with social distancing because we'll let them do things that they can do and maintain safety. Field trips just aren't going to happen next year. We're just not going to be sending kids anywhere. Conferences and meetings for teachers are going to be severely curtailed, if not eliminated. There's one special one here, choir and wind instruments. So when you're singing, you don't project your breath only 6 feet out. You project it farther than that. And wind instruments are even worse because like a flute is like, it's like a target, a COVID pea shooter, if you want to think of it that way. So we're trying to think of what can we do. Now, one idea we're looking at is can we have choir outside and put the kids 10 feet apart? Or can we use face shields, in addition, not face masks, you can't see with a face mask on, but face shield and keep the kids apart. Clubs, student clubs, we're telling them you can meet at lunch, but only if you can maintain 6 feet of distance and all that. It's not like a classroom. In a classroom, if you can't maintain 6 feet of distance, it's okay. But in a club activity, it's not. Assemblies and rallies are things that just aren't going to happen for a year. There's others on this list. Parent volunteers. I mean, it's really a sad thing, but we've had to make a decision. It's been made countywide. We're not going to have parents volunteering in classrooms next year. We just can't do it. By the way, classrooms are going to look very different. If you've been in a classroom recently, it doesn't look like those, in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, how it's all, or Fast Times at Ridgemont High, it's all rows and columns. The kids are in rows and columns. That's how it used to be when I was in high school and elementary school. Now it's all kids are grouped together and all this nice stuff. None of that's happening. We're back to rows and columns, and the desks are spread out as far around the room as we can spread them out. We get about 4 feet per distance between kids that way. We're shooting for at least 3. So what could next year look like? Is that my next slide? Yes, it is. Okay. When I dropped this, I wasn't sure if I kept the order of pages right. So the first option for us that we want to go to next year, and it's not just Ceres. It's great. You probably love that, Jim, right? Yeah. So throughout this county, and really I think the desire across the country is to get kids back in school, every kid, every day. So that's what our primary goal is to get every kid every day, and we're preparing for that. I was feeling pretty good about that until a week or two ago, and then I'm starting to get some butterflies going, and I'm watching what's happening around us and wondering if we'll be able to do that. But we're still planning for that with modifications, with a distance learning option for parents who don't want their kid in school. We've had about 300 students sign up for a distance learning option. So that represents between 2 and 3% of our student body. That's not a huge amount. Now, if we can't do that, the next best thing, we're preparing plans for this, is to go every student every other day. That means you get half the instruction. And by the way, it's not distance learning on the every other day, because the teacher's busy with the other half of their kids. It's basically, I teach you, give you something to do the next day, and then I'll see you in 2 days. So it's basically reduces the student's learning in half. It's not a great idea. But it's better than distance learning, which is the third bullet there, that if we have to go back to, we'll go back to, because it is better than nothing by a little bit. We could experience any or all of these, and it could be done by grade levels. We have a certain grade level. Hey, you've had too much sickness in this grade level at this school, you're going out. Or a whole school could be shut down for a while, or a whole district, or a whole county, or the whole state. It's lots of different options and possibilities. We just aren't going to know. And the last thing I want to touch on, I think I'm good with time here. So we rely on money just like everybody else does, and I'm not going to sit and cry the blues because we are in so much better position, and I feel so lucky to be in public education because we didn't have to suffer some of the economic hits that businesses took, that whole segments of society are taking right now. But we do have some financial considerations, and I think it's worth talking about. So to open, which is what our plan is, we need a lot of personal protective equipment. We can't require kids to have masks and not supply them. Legally, we can't do that because it's compulsory education. So if we give every kid a mask every day, we have 14,000 students times 180 days. It's a lot of masks. So it's about $600,000 if masks, or something like that, if masks cost like a quarter or so each. It's a lot of money. We don't think we'll need that much because we're going to encourage parents to send kids with masks from home. But we're also looking at face shields. We put in a preliminary order for 15,000 face shields. We have pallets of hand sanitizer. All sorts of things. Thermometers, we have a thermometer for every teacher now, a scanning thermometer, because we want them to be able to take temperatures if they feel they need to take temperatures. So those are some, and then we have additional staff. We are hiring additional staff regardless of the budget. We are going to do it because we have to do it. So every school site in our district is going to have an additional daytime custodian next year, a temporary, short-term, one-year employee, because we feel like we have to have that other person there to help clean and deal with the cafeterias and all that sort of stuff during the day. And there's other positions as well like that. The reality is, for our society, the economic reality is grim. We're not seeing it completely yet because of all the stimulus package. That's going to start running out. When it starts running out, you're going to see what really happened in the economy. And as bad as it may feel right now, we haven't felt the worst of it. the state budget for 2021 that just got passed is assuming that the feds are going to help states. And I think there's some good reason to believe that that will be true. And that keeps us flat funded from last year. And that's fantastic for us. We're very happy with flat funding. We can make that work. There's also a great deal of one-time money that we've been given, although government does some really terrible things, and sometimes you wonder, like, oh, the red tape of the government. It does the worst to itself. And if you haven't been in government, you may not understand this, but the worst red tape is what government does to itself. So we're getting all this one-time money, but it has strings attached, and we're still trying to untangle what the strings mean, and can we use it to hire custodians, or can we use it for this or that? Someday we'll figure that out. We also know the state is actually giving us help on protective equipment, personal protective equipment. There's a giant order coming, supposedly 60 days worth. I'm not exactly sure what 60 days means. You know, it could be a lot. It could be like, yeah, you think that's 60 days? But we'll take all help we can get. Here's the problem. If there's no federal help for us, then what the state's going to do is it's going to pay us late. It's going to pay us late. It's going to pay us in 21-22 money that it owes us in 2021. So I want you to think about your job. If you got your paycheck, if your boss said, I know I owe you $4,000 for pay this month, but I'm going to give you 1,000 of it or 2,000 of it next month. How's your budget going to work? So that's going to be a problem. We'll figure that out, but we at least have a budget that works. And the other piece of this reality, as the clock ticks down on me, is that money is going to be a problem for a number of years. Any of us that think that the economy is going to bounce fully back to where it was in 2019, we're fooling ourselves. There's been some very profound damage done to our economy in the shutdown that will take a while. Economies just don't restart. You know, if a company folds and people lose their jobs, it takes time for somebody else to, when the economy comes back, to reopen another business, to take the place of that, to add jobs. It takes time. And that's the reality that we face. So with that, I think that's everything I had, and I'm happy to answer questions if I have time to answer questions. Don't breathe into the mic, Jim.
Scott, we've been friends for a while, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate your work out at Ceres Unified School District. And one of the greatest things I think you've done is built a district with great people and incredible support structure for them. I'm wondering, all of the numbers and everything is one thing, but there's also a sense of morale of how your teachers, how you're doing as an administrator. And I wonder if you could just tell us, what's the feeling like in the school district? That's the first part. The second part would be, what is the best way as a community that we can support you as a superintendent and then also your teachers? What are some, obviously we can't come work in the classrooms, but what are some tangible ways that you think we could support as churches, as businesses, as nonprofits, as parents? Like, what could we do to help?
So I'll give you an answer to each of those. So first, as far as morale and all of that, I want to start with our teachers and our support staff did some amazing work during the shutdown. And I don't want anybody to think that when I said distance learning doesn't work, that any way reflects on the efforts that they made. I think they would all tell you the same thing. This was not the same as having the kids with us. So I think that for the most part, they would like to see us back at work. I think there's a lot of apprehension about how are we going to do this safely. When I've talked to teachers about some of the things that we're going to do, like having face shields available, that makes them feel a lot better. That seems to be a big one for teachers, is the face shields, because they need their kids to be able to see their mouths, especially at the younger grade levels. I think they want it to work. They just need to see how it's going to work. And there's some fear, and there should be. We are taking a risk, and we know we're taking risks, and we're balancing out how important is this essential activity versus the risk of people getting sick from it. And if we think that we're going to open and no one's going to get sick because of it, and there aren't going to be negative consequences, we're fooling ourselves. So it's really a calculated risk of we cannot have an entire generation of kids have another year away from school. That's just not going to, that's going to have some profoundly detrimental effects on our society. So that gets to the next piece of your question, which is what can we do as a community to help? We make decisions as a community all the time. So if we have a bar open or a gym open and people get sick there and our rates go up and we get to a point where we can't open schools, we made the decision that being able to go work out or have a drink in a crowded bar was more important than kids being in school. And I hate to say that what I do is really important, but I really feel that it is, that having schools open is really, really important, and probably more important than having bars open, and more important than having gyms open. And if it is, what the community can do is make good decisions about what activities we engage in, because everything is risk. And so if we could eliminate the risk in areas that are not as important, so that we can engage in risk in areas that are more important, I think that's the single biggest thing. And take this thing seriously, because you may not know anybody who's gotten it or anybody who's died from it. That's only because we've done a good job of not letting this thing get out of control and not having 20 to 30 million infected Californians. Mm-hmm.
There have been conversations in the media about mental health issues, challenges that the kids are facing, and then when they get back to school, they're going to be left at your doorstep. So what kind of conversation and preparation are you making to support those children as they go back to school and things get revealed?
Absolutely. That's a great question. And I'm really, really lucky to work in a school district that has adequate funding where we've actually ramped up our mental health services. So we've had conversations about when the kids get back, there's a couple things that we have to do before we start really figuring out about teaching. I mean, we've got a loss of learning from 3 months of less education than we want that we have to make up for, and that's not our top priority right now. Our top priority is going to be several things. One of them is exactly that, we need to know if the kids need help. We have the resources available. We have mental health services at every school site in our district. And so we should be able to take care of and help them with what they need. The other piece that we have to deal with before we start really worrying about education and learning is getting the kids ready for a shutdown should we have it. So there's a couple things that we're telling people, these need to happen early on. Are the kids okay? Are they ready to go back to distance learning so that we can do a better job of it and not get caught by surprise by it? And then let's get on to instructing kids and teaching. But mental health is very much high on the list. If I was in a district that didn't have those resources available, every school site has at least one employee full-time dedicated to that, and most have more than that, much more than that. I would feel pretty apprehensive about that question because kids are going to come back and need things. And it's not because they were out of school for 3 months. It's because families have had trauma during this time. Parents are laid off, out of work. There's financial issues. There's food insecurity. There's a lot of things happening. It's possible that they know people who have been sick and who have died. They have family members they're worried about, all of those things. So it's not so much the shutdown, it's the things that happen in society because of COVID.
Could you invite questions from the Facebook Live?
I would love to have questions from the Facebook Live group. So if you type in your questions, they will get them to me.
I have one, and then I will ask Sarah. Sona asked, when is this information going out to parents?
So that's a district-by-district decision. We've had parent communications going out. That document that was up earlier, that county handbook, that link has been sent to all our parents. Our parents have been communicated with pretty regularly. If parents have questions from school districts, whether it's mine or a different school district, and they feel like they're not getting the information, my advice is to contact that school district or your school site. And a lot of school sites are closed right now, so it probably have to be the district office, and ask whatever questions you have. You need to get the information.
So working with refugee and immigrant students, we've had a lot of difficult conversations with families who arrived at the end of spring, and probably anticipate those conversations for the ones that arrive this next month. Is there a plan? I know this is a difficult one. Is there a plan for those who may be arriving with zero English and who really benefit from that face-to-face teaching aspect to learn English? Is there a plan for them to be able to access English learning if the parents do choose to stay home? Because I know a lot of the families, they come after some facing trauma in their home countries, and they come here and they're really scared to send their kids to school at all right now. And then others who know, they know they're not going to learn English necessarily at home with the parents working with them. So has that been a conversation so far?
I haven't had that conversation because the conversation we have had is that we need to do whatever we can do in that particular case to get the kids to school. So I would want to work very closely with the parents to try to assuage the concerns. There's a couple of groups I'm more concerned about than others. I'm not as concerned about an honor student who's a junior right now is probably not going to get traumatically hurt. It's not great, but it's not going to be as bad as a kindergartner who's an English learner. That time in school is so essential, and that getting behind from kindergarten is really tough. And the group you just mentioned, so somebody coming in, whatever education level they're at, in their home language or their native language, and they come to our school district with no English, we've got to get some really pretty intensive help with them, and that's not something that we can do by distance. It just isn't. So we've got to figure out how to get them to our campuses and whatever we can do. And we have resources, I mentioned that one-time money, we have resources that we may be able to help and send somebody, maybe have some one-on-one with them that we'll be able to do, but it won't replace the conversational English they're going to learn interacting with their peers. There's just no way to replace that.
We got another question from Facebook. John asks, are there benchmarks to revise this plan, i.e. numbers of cases change in plan statewide? How likely is, in your estimate, is of this plan changing?
I'll start with the last part of the question. The plans, it's sometime during the year, whether it's at the beginning of the year or into the year, I believe the plan will change. We will have school sites or grade levels, like I said earlier, that have to go to a different plan. I think that's a reality that we're looking at. Repeat the first part again. I lost it. I'm sorry.
Are there benchmarks to revise this plan?
That's right. Thank you. So we've been in contact with the educational community in this county. Is very close contact with the public health officer and Stanislaus County Public Health. And we don't have a specific number or a specific situation because everything is so different. Depending on exact circumstances of what's going on, and when you contact trace and figure out how any disease is working. So there's not a number or anything in that sense. It's more of a call that the public health officer will make. We're going to open until she tells us that we can't. That's our plan. And I don't mean that to sound like it's a bad thing. If she feels the situation is such that we just can't do it, she'll let us know that we can't do it. And that's her job. Our job is to educate the students. So we rely on public health because we're not doctors and don't really know enough to make the right decision that way.
Scott, this is more of a gut answer, but based on the same reports that I read and you read, do you think there's a high probability that sometime this year there'll be another stay-at-home order? And in that case, would you do something different than what you did last time? I mean, is there another contingency plan for that?
What we're working on right now, we've got teams of teachers and people, curriculum specialists, working on our plans for what distance learning will look like and what we'll do differently. So that's happening right now. The biggest single thing is when we shut down in the spring, it was very little warning. And as a result, we felt that we couldn't hold kids as accountable as we wanted to hold kids. So word got out around the county, around the state pretty quickly that, like, if you don't do your work, nothing bad is going to happen to you. So what we will do differently is increase accountability. Now, we're very cognizant of that's not totally fair because not every kid has access the same way at home. But we've got to be able to grade kids. And we've got to be able to assess their learning in a way that we really didn't do as well as I would like to have done in the spring. I say that's a statewide issue, a countrywide issue. So that's the biggest thing is the level of it in terms of it's mandatory kids. It's not optional. You need to engage in this distance learning. There's going to be some huge equity issues that come out of that, and we're trying to work our way through them. Did I get the whole question? Okay. All right. Let me find it. Thank you.
Thank
Well, thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Scott, for your time. We've been kicking around this conversation in the community. What are the schools going to do? What are the questions? So thank you so much. You've been Been terrific. Just real quick, when it comes to this season, it's been a crazy season, of course. But you know what? Our society, the world has never has faced these situations before. And as we've said a couple of times over the last few months, when Winston Churchill said something like, never waste a good opportunity, never waste a good crisis, is what he said. I'm confident that many of you, and we've encouraged you and challenged you, and those of us closest to me, we've been challenging each other and encouraging each other to take advantage of this craziness, this crisis, this thing. First is that we've been here before, and we are resilient, we are teachable, we learn, we come away from this stronger, and I want to encourage each one of you to come away from this season stronger than when you entered. And I'm going to give you just a couple of short suggestions, as we have before, to consider during this crisis and during this season the quality of your life. This gives you the opportunity to stop to consider the quality of your life and the quality of your relationships, taking time to ask yourself the hard questions, the specific questions about the direction and the quality of your life and the quality of your relationships. And many of you have been, I'll say, stuck or connected with family members, children in your house. I hope that you've taken this time to take advantage and to build and come out of the relationship stronger. I know our family has. I want to encourage you, too, to reimagine, to consider reimagining your relationships, reimagining the quality of them, especially out in the community. I hope that you've used your time in Zoom, or at least these last couple of weeks when you've been able to get out. And you were in Stanislaus County, we get to close down again, but that you've taken the time to meet with people and to reestablish relationships and evaluating your circle of influence. Those of us who attend Catalyst are leaders of leaders, so we are responsible for circles of influence and other spheres of influence in our community. So we have a voice in the direction that our sphere of influence goes. And so I want to encourage each one of you to continue, just like Scott has, to evaluate. I mean, he was stuck in a place where he had to evaluate. He had to think out loud with his teams and get creative. And a lot of us have been facing that. And I want to encourage you to keep doing that. I was thinking what Scott was talking about as well is for all of us as leaders of leaders to be sure that you're using the correct scorecard. Now, before COVID, we had certain scorecards to define and measure results and success. And we were using certain measurables. This is a season when we have to stop to reconsider, are those measurables still working for us? Are those still valid? And I know the people around me, we've been asking those questions all the time, especially as we move forward. And the purpose of this time, as well as these evaluations of your personal life, your relationships, your work, is that our communities, whether it's Ceres, Modesto, Turlock, Oakdale, Riverbank, Keys, Newman, Patterson, Grayson, is that these communities are great places to grow up in and to grow old in. And during these seasons, let's stop and consider. And then also, too, I was thinking about the school district and the city government, the county government, all of us together remembering, let's align our efforts. Let's coordinate our services. Let's go across sector lines to be sure that we're communicating clearly and efficiently in every one of our communications. And everything that we're working, let's work together on that. I'm going to give you a couple different things I want to encourage you, just like we do at the end of every Catalyst, is to schedule a time with somebody to meet outside. I've been meeting outside with people, and so meeting outside for some coffee. Again, if we get back to Zoom, just to meet with them, just to continue to connect and develop relationships. And we say this often, that everything in this community happens because of trust relationships. When we sit in a room together, we connect out of trust, and we begin to fashion a better world for each other and for our future, and this morning for our children. If the opportunity comes up to share with somebody today, some of the things that Scott said, they could take you to, we have videotaped this and recorded it on Facebook Live, so you can send somebody in the direction and have them fast forward to Scott's talk to give you some ideas what the superintendents are thinking and how they're feeling and how they're preparing the best they can, for the future. City Minister Network is a faith-based nonprofit, and so we do rely on the gifts of others. And so I want to encourage you, if you've been a part of City Ministry Network, Catalyst, or other things that we're doing, our training schools, and you are you'd like to give, we'd love to have you participate with us financially in this. And then next month at Catalyst, the virus of COVID hit us, then the virus of racism really kicked off with George Floyd, but it had been a whole series of other things. And if you've been in this community as long as I have, the talks of both sides are coming out, and this side and that side, and I feel this way and I think this way. But it's really easy to take from this community, look to Minneapolis or look to New York City, and to project in that direction. Next month at Catalyst, we're gonna take a step into the water, and we're gonna take a look at the historical perspective of racism in this community, what it's looked like in this community, and also give you some directions and some thoughts and some considerations going forward. An historical look at local racism and what does racism look like here in this community. So we're going to dip our foot in the water, because I tell you what, we've got to have these honest, candid conversations, uncomfortable conversations. That's the only way we start healing and getting better. So thank you so much for being a part with us. I'm going to pray, and then we'll let you go. Lord, thanks for this time. For our children, keep them safe, the families, the tensions that are going in the homes. Some have done well and some have done poorly. But Lord, thank you that you're going to heal them. And thanks for Scott. What a gift he is to our community. And even though I've never really had a lot of time with him, the story of his life and his leadership, the quality of both, is spread out throughout our community. And we are lucky and fortunate to have him lead our children and our families in Ceres, but also be a strong influence to every one of the other school districts in our community. In my Lord's name I pray. Amen. Good morning.